Breakfast, Tuesday morning, 11 minutes past 7. Almost 1,000 people forced to leave the Libyan city of Misrata have arrived in Benghazi, currently held by opponents of Colonel Gaddafi. Britain's agreed to provide £1.5 million to help rescue a total of around 5,000 people from the city, as talks about what should happen next continue at the UN in New York.
Well, yesterday on Breakfast, you might remember we spoke to Azzeldin El-Sharif. He's the president of the British Libya Solidarity Campaign. He had this to say to people who oppose Western intervention in his country.
If you have any sympathy towards the Libyan people, go there, sit by the Libyan people, and then fight or ask the NATO to stop intervention. This is absolutely a message to George Galloway, Lindsey German, and everybody who opposes the intervention. The Libyan people are dying under Gaddafi's very heavy machine guns, and we didn't see or hear any sympathy towards them.
Lindsey German is a convener for the Stop the War coalition. Good morning to you. What's your reaction to what Azzeldin said there?
Well, good morning. Well, I obviously sympathise with the Libyans who are in support of the rebellion and who are watching what goes on in their country with horror. But I don't believe that the Western intervention is going to do any good. We heard very, very similar pleas from people in Afghanistan and Iraq in the past, where people said we have to support these wars because it will help the people of those countries. We know now that didn't happen, and I'm afraid that the Libyans will not get the help they want from the Western powers. Instead, they will get an intervention which will make the situation in the country worse.
But with the greatest respect, he's there. Doesn't he know better?
Well, I'm not sure that he is there, but whether he's there or not, the point is that you have to judge these things not simply by people who are there, because the Libyans themselves are very divided over this question. You have to judge it by the past form of the NATO forces and of the government and what you think that they're doing. And let's also remember that it was only 3 months ago that the British government was fully in support of Colonel Gaddafi and had no problem with him, as neither did they have with any of the other dictators in the region, whereas people like myself were opposing these people for a very, very long time and campaigning against them for a very, very long time.
To the people that Stop the War, would you stop any war? I mean, is that the idea of the Stop the War coalition? If you'd have been around, say, in 1939, would you have opposed the Second World War?
Well, I think the Second World War is a different situation, and actually I had family who fought in the Second World War. They were very proud to do so because they thought we were fighting against fascism. I think. Do you think they'd be proud
of you now for taking part in Stop the War?
Well, to compare what they did then with this episode, which Cameron and Sarkozy are taking us into, I think is invidious. It's not the same kind of thing at all, and we shouldn't confuse the two. We have had these arguments, as I say, we've had these arguments put for 10 years now. We now have a failed war in Afghanistan. We have disaster in Iraq. We should not be going into a third country. And after all, let's remember that only last week a number of heads of African states went to Libya to try to get a ceasefire. This was ignored by NATO and by the Western powers because they didn't want to see.
The only reason I asked you the question was to establish whether you oppose every war just because it's a war, or whether you take each case on its own merits.
We take each case on its own merits, but Stop the War was set up not against all wars in the world, which unfortunately there are far too many, but to oppose the war on terror launched by George Bush nearly a decade ago. And this war is very, very much in the pattern of the war on terror. That is why we oppose it. We believe it is part of re-establishing the doctrine of humanitarian intervention, which has been dealt such a blow by the events of the last 10 years, and we don't think it is right. And we do think that it's up to the Libyan people to decide for themselves how their country is run. I have no time for Colonel Gaddafi, and I'm perfectly against what he's done. I'm perfectly happy to see him overthrown, but this has to be done by the Libyans themselves, not by the people of the governments of Britain and America and France acting in this way. We should also remember that they do not have the support here of a whole number of other countries, including Germany, including Russia, including a whole number of major countries in the world, nor do they have very widespread support among the British people.
OK, thank you for your thoughts. Lindsey German, convener for the Stop the War coalition. 16 minutes past